Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Jaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike Srinvata Svakadha Krishna Punyasravana Kirtanaha Hridayantastoya Bhadrani Vidhunoti Surutsatam. Hare Krishna. Welcome back, everyone, for our daily Bhagavatam session. We are in Canto 3, the status quo, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature, verse 13. Evam trivrid ahankaro bhutendriya manomayaha स्वाभाषैर्लक्षितो नेन सद आभासेन satyadrek. Synonyms. Evam, thus, trivrit, the threefold, ahankaraha, the false ego, bhuta indriya manaha mayaha, consisting of body, senses, and mind, swa abhasai, by its own reflections, lakshitaha, is revealed, anena, by this, sat abhasena, by reflection of of Brahman, satyadrik, the self-realized soul. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhaycharan Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. The self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. Purport. The conditioned soul thinks I am this body, but a liberated soul thinks I am not this body, I am spirit soul. This I am is called ego or identification of the self. I am this body or everything in relation to the body. Relationship to the body is mine is called false ego. But when one is self-realized and thinks that he is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, that identification is real ego. One conception is in the darkness of the threefold qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the other is in the pure state of goodness, called Shuddha Sattva or Vasudeva. When we say that we give up our ego, this means that we give up our false ego. But real ego is always present. When one is reflected through the material contamination of the body and mind in false identification, he is in the conditional state. But when he is reflected in the pure stage, he is called liberated. The identification of oneself with one's material positions in the conditional stage must be purified, and one must identify himself in relationship with the Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one accepts everything as an object of sense gratification, and in the liberated state, one accepts everything for the service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness, devotional service, is the actual liberated stage of a living entity. Otherwise, both accepting and rejecting on the material platform, or in voidness or impersonalism, are imperfect conditions for the pure soul. By the understanding of the pure soul, called Satyadrik, one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A concrete example can be given in this connection. A conditioned soul sees a very beautiful rose and he thinks that the nice aromatic flower should be used for his own sense gratification. This is one kind of vision. A liberated soul, however, sees the same flower as a reflection of the Supreme Lord. He thinks this beautiful flower is made possible by the superior energy of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it belongs to the Supreme Lord and should be utilized in his service. These are two kinds of vision. The conditioned soul sees the flower for his own enjoyment, and the devotee sees the flower as an object to be used in the service of the Lord. In the same way, one can see the reflection of the Supreme Lord in one's own senses, mind, and body, in everything. With that correct vision, one can engage everything in the service of the Lord. It is stated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that one who has engaged everything, his vital energy, his wealth, his intelligence, and his words in the service of the Lord, or who desires to engage all these in the service of the Lord, no matter how he is situated, he is to be considered a liberated soul, or Satyadrik. Such a man has understood things as they are. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We'll offer some prayers and come back for the discussion. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्यति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Once again, welcome back. I was uh, I was feeling sorry that after such an enlivening classes by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, I am following up that discussion. So I was just feeling sorry that it would have been wonderful for some other amazing devotee from our community to follow up today's discussion with after such soul enriching discussions that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu did. Um, so as I was actually reading this purport, I did prepare for the class, but as I was reading this, the last section of the purport, a recent incident that happened in Gita Nagari came to my mind, and I just wanted to share that. So in Gita Nagari, the retreat that just happened over the Memorial Day weekend, one of the as part of the children activities, one of the thing that Rasika Manjari Mataji and Krishna Priya Mataji, who organized all the children activities from 5 to 15. One of the session was the kids could ask their question and answer session, like any question that they wanted to ask, they could ask to Maharaj. His only is Rumpad Swami Maharaj. And Sia, our Amani Radha Mataji and Kishore Krishna Prabhu's daughter, she asked a question to Maharaj saying, "How do I how do I reach or approach Krishna at the end of the death, or what would happen at the end of the death? How would I reach Krishna at the end of this life or after death?" And in relation to that, Maharaj was answering that your question is, how do I reach Krishna at the end of the life? And Prabhu Maharaj was saying that in kind of, I'm paraphrasing, you don't have to wait till the end of the life to reach Krishna. And he was giving the example of Srila Prabhupada, saying that Srila Prabhupada was in this world, but he was always connected to his spiritual master, and through that connection, he was always connected to um, the Supreme Lord and his entire entourage. So Mara was saying that the way that we can reach Krishna, we don't have to wait till the end of the life, is we can just reach Krishna in this life by performing devotional service. And when Prabhupada wrote the line that it is stated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and then he says, who desires, like not even engaging everything, one who desires to engage all these services in the Lord, no matter how he is situated, he is to be considered a liberated soul. So I was like this statement of just the desire to engage all these services in the service of the Lord, forgetting about if you are able to physically do it or not even do it. Just the desire has such potency that will in a kind of in a moment's time we will the entire situation is changed So that was one thing that I wanted to kind of, I just felt inspired to share. Um, Regarding the discussion, Prabhupada kind of talks about, this is quite a big purport, and Prabhupada talks about multiple things. But there are two things that I kind of wanted to touch upon, especially for the lack of time that we have today. Um, is one is just an example of Prabhupada that I wanted to present, a story of Srila Prabhupada, um, on the topic, on the example that Prabhupada was giving, where he was saying that one can see by the understanding of the person, a pure soul, one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I wanted to touch upon this point through a story of Srila Prabhupada, and then we will try to see what does it even mean by the self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego, and then in the body, senses, and mind. Like when I first read this translation as part of my preparation, like I couldn't understand anything of how is that a self-realized soul is first reflected first in the threefold ego, and then how is that connected to body, senses, and mind. So we'll just have some discussion on that. But before we get to that point, the story that I was referring is on this point of one can see that a pure soul sees everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'm sure all of us might have heard this story. This is, in case if you have not heard this story by His Holiness Indradumna Swami Maharaj, this is a famous talk that he has given almost, I think, 15 years back in ISKCON Chowpatty. The If you go to YouTube, the YouTube talk is called as Silver Spoon. It basically is the story of how Indradumna Maharaj came in contact with devotees and how was his initial interactions with Srila Prabhupada. So through that story, Indradumna Maharaj narrates one specific pastime of Srila Prabhupada, which is exactly on this point of how a pure soul sees everything as a reflection or in connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it so happened. So the story goes, Srila Prabhupada is his assistant and then his Sanskrit scholar Pradyumna Prabhu were traveling from, I think, LA to Europe, and in the same flight, it so happened that Indradumna Maharaj and the temple president of the place where Indradumna Maharaj was serving at that point, Bhagavant Prabhu, were also kind of Indradumna Maharaj made sure that they can also travel in the same flight as Srila Prabhupada, who would lose the opportunity to travel with Srila Prabhupada. So he made sure he got the ticket and everything was there. So they boarded the plane and Prabhupada had prasad, and Indradumna Maharaj then says that this is the first time that Indradumna Maharaj, in fact, was in so close proximity to Prabhupada, and he kind of wanted to, uh, what do you, I think, for lack of better term, impress Srila Prabhupada. So he says that he started opening Bhagavad Gita and started reciting various verses. And as he started reciting these verses, he observed that in the airplane that they were traveling on, they started they started the movie. And at this point, Indradumna Maharaj wanted to impress Srila Prabhupada more, because to kind of show that yes, I'm a devotee, so I'll not watch the movie, but I'll actually read Bhagavad Gita. And after a short while, so Indradumna Maharaj was sitting here, and then Pradyumna Prabhu was sitting there, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the other corner. And suddenly, Indradumna Maharaj starts hearing these huge laughters of Srila Prabhupada. And then he sees Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada is actually watching the movie. Srila Prabhupada was chanting before that, and then once the movie started, Srila Prabhupada started watching the movie. And Indradumna Maharaj was confused that Srila Prabhupada is watching a movie. And then he still wanted to impress Srila Prabhupada, saying that no, no, no. Prabhupada might be watching movie, but I'll read Bhagavad Gita. And after he says, Indradumna Maharaj says, after a few minutes of futile trying, he just closes the Bhagavad Gita and then he puts it aside. And then all of them start watching the movie. And the movie was Charlie Chaplin's movie. And Indradumna Maharaj says that these three devotees were so hysterically laughing. It felt that these were the only three people sitting in the airplane, and everybody were kind of silent. Everybody were enjoying the movie, but these Srila Prabhupada, Pradyumna Prabhu, and His Holiness Indradumna Maharaj were the three people who were hysterically laughing, like the new age term that we call it as like ruffle, rolling on the floor laughing. It was kind of in that mode. And then once the movie was done, then Srila Prabhupada went back to his mode of, he went back to chanting in Hare Krishna, and then everything was back to normal as it was before the movie started. But Indradyumna Maharaj was so curious that he wanted to understand that how come Prabhupada watched this movie? And but Indradyumna Maharaj didn't feel so um, um, I can say kind of close enough to kind of ask Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, why did you watch this movie? So he asked Pradyumna Prabhu to come to the back of the airplane. And they said, I want to understand why did Srila Prabhupada watch this movie? And Pradyumna Prabhu said, that's your question. So you should be the one who is asking. No, 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 I don't want to ask. You know Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada more. So can you please go and ask Srila Prabhupada? So he goes, and Indradyumna Maharaj is still standing at the back of the airplane. And Indradyumna Maharaj, in his quite expressive way, says that he was just waiting, and then he was trying to see what Srila was saying, what Pradyumna Prabhu was saying. And as he was standing there and he saw Pradyumna Prabhu's face was, wow, is this what? So when Srila Prabhupada started answering, Pradyumna Prabhu was like just surprised and amazed by the response that Prabhupada gave. And so Pradyumna Prabhu comes back and is only Sindhudyumna Maharaj then asks, okay, what did Prabhupada say? And Prabhupada's answer was this. Prabhupada's answer was, Charlie Chaplin's humor is original, and Krishna is the source of all originals. So when I was watching Charlie Chaplin's humor, I was seeing Krishna in Charlie Chaplin's humor. And that was Srila Prabhupada's response. And Indidimna Maharaj says that when he heard that, it was like such a profound statement for Indidimna Maharaj from the place where he was seeing everything. He kind of wanted to impress Srila Prabhupada because he was kind of, oh, I can read Bhagavad Gita and all of that. But here is a person who is in all from a material plane level, he's just on the same level sitting as him, traveling in the same flight, eating the same food that he was there. And in fact, it was that Srila Prabhupada was dependent on these people, on these two devotees, Pradyumna Prabhu and his only Sindhujumna Swami Maharaj, for giving him the food, for carrying his luggage and everything. So in fact, it just so seems on an external physical level that Prabhupada is dependent on them, but on the same physical level, I mean on the same level, is not there. So it's kind of a phenomenon where he's there but he's kind of not there. And that in the Jumna Maharaj says that was such a profound experience in his life to kind of see that it's not of external manifestation or external physicality of doing anything, but it is how a pure devotee would be able to see everything in connection to or to Krishna. And it's not a kind of um, a very philosophical connection or anything. Srila Prabhupada was just appreciating, again tying back to the verse of Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that anything splendor is but a spark of my, like anything magnificent is but a spark of my splendor. And this story of Srila Prabhupada is just a explanation of that statement, that Prabhupada was genuinely appreciating the originality of Charlie Chaplin's humor. And for Srila Prabhupada, everything because emanates from Krishna, and Krishna is the origin, is the source of everything original. And then he was just appreciating how, in that aspect of humor, how Charlie Chaplin was so empowered by the energy of Krishna, and through that he was appreciating both the person who is empowered by that energy and the energetic. So it's um, this is such a, like there are, I would genuinely suggest, I would encourage all of us, if any of us have not heard this sequence of talk by His Holiness Induduna Maharaj called a Silver Spoon, I urge to definitely, because this is just one of the story that Indra Maharaj touches, but there are so many amazing those stories. Like once he was like, after this, then what happened in London, and but before that, it's such an amazing kind of life transforming experiences one after the other. It's like just that 1 hour, 15 minutes of talk could kind of enrich our understanding of multiple things, what the devotees were doing at that time to kind of propagate the movement, and how was Srila Prabhupada empowering them and their individual connections with Srila Prabhupada. So many of those, and I would kind of I just wanted to, when this point came of how a pure soul sees everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the story that came to my mind was this, and I wanted to share that. I think I went a little over time with that. But so coming back to the point of the translation where it says the self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. Um, so our acharyas explain this. So when so our acharyas kind of we see that there is a sequence of verses that explain certain topic, and then the sequence moves on to the next one. So it's like a kind of check digit that keeps moving. So in this, our acharyas explain that the verse 12 and verse 13 are kind of the combination of the verses that explains how do we, what is the specific word that was used? Yeah. So the verse 12 and the verse 13 are the verses that Kapiladeva is explaining to Mother Devahuti to explain about the inference of soul and super soul. How is that a person might infer upon or come to a conclusion that the soul and super soul actually exists. And then the verse 12 goes like this: the presence of the Supreme Lord, which is the super soul, can be realized just as the sun is realized first as a reflection on water and again as a second reflection on the wall of a room, although the sun itself is situated in the sky. And in connection to that, then Kapila Devi is saying the self realize is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. So, what Kapila is correlating here is the threefold ego is relating to the first reflection, as in the verse. I'll try to share my screen. So the threefold ego is the first reflection that is being suggested here as the reflection on the water. And then the body, senses, and mind is the second reflection, which is the wall of a room. So Srila Prabhupada slightly touches upon this, but other acharyas kind of elaborate kind of further more on this. Is they suggest us to kind of imagine a room which is quite dark. So imagine of a room or of a hut which is on the banks of a river, of a small lake, which is quite clear, peaceful lake, and quite transparent, quite clear water lake, and it's just before the sunrise. And as the sun starts rising, the person who is in this room, in one corner of the room, which is quite dark, starts observing that the wall, which is facing the lake, starts to get brighten. And through the light that is reflecting on the wall, he starts to observe everything else, and including himself. And when if as any intellectual person or any curious person would want to understand, okay, now there is the wall was dark and suddenly it's starting to light up, so where is the light coming from? And when he observes the source of the light that is reflecting on the wall, he observes that the lake is actually brightened up. In the night when he was seeing, the lake was all dark, and now he's seeing that the lake is actually brightened up, and he then navigates his focus to the lake, and he says that where is the light that is coming from in the lake? And then he realizes the sun rays, which is the energy of the sun, as Kapila is explaining here, even though the sun itself is situated in the sky, it is far ahead, far, it is far placed. The sun is not moving anywhere. The sun is situated itself very far from the physical place where this person is saying, but the energy is the one that is transmitting from the sun, and is first of all reflecting in the lake, which is the first as a reflection on the water, and then again on the reflection, again on the reflection of a room, although the sun itself is situated. So then Kapildev is now suggesting that, so the sequence that Kapila suggests is imagining of a sunny day and all of that. Then the question comes up as, how is the light reflecting on a clear water? And then the person who is shining, the sun who is shining the sky far, far away from the lake, the sun, the energy, the sun rays are then reflecting on the water, and that light is then reflecting on the wall, illuminating the room. So similarly, now it comes back to this person. In the first reflection, as we just discussed, is the threefold ego, and then the second reflection is the body, senses, and mind. Here also, the first reflection of the sun, the energy, fell upon the waters, and then it came to the reflection on the wall of a room. So, but for the person who is in the room, who is in kind of submerged with the darkness, his first point of inference or first point of focus was the wall of a room. Similarly, a curious person starts to realize that, okay, the body is there, I can see the body, I can see the senses, and I can feel the presence of the mind, but how is it that there is consciousness that's reflecting upon these dead matters? Because we all hear this point from Srila Prabhupada, where what is the difference, the body, the senses, and the mind in some ways is also present in the person who is dead. Then how is it that the body and senses, on the physical level, is present on a person who is dead, and the person who is just feeling sad because the person is dead? What is the difference between those? So if a curious person could kind of think, okay, there is some level of consciousness that's different. So the first reflection that he is observing of the consciousness is on the body, senses, and the mind. So that's the first level of reflection of the wall that he's doing. So through that, he's able to realize that, oh, it's not always dark. So there is some presence of the light, which means that this first inference or the first reflection is pointing to the consciousness or the jiva himself. So the first reference any curious person would understand is that, oh, it's not just the dead matter that exists, but there is some level of consciousness which is then translated in this verse, Swa Abhilasha, by its own reflections, Swabhasai, consisting of the body, senses, and mind, by its own reflections. Then he understands that, oh, there is level of consciousness that exists. And then he starts to think, okay, if there is a level of consciousness that existing, where is the source of this consciousness? And that's the point that it comes back to as reflection of water. Now when he's trying to identify that, okay, the wall is getting illuminated, where is the source of the light that is coming onto the wall, then he points back to the source for this wall, which becomes the water, the clear water of the lake that is standing that is just outside of this house. And in that way, when he comes back and then he starts to identify upon further, when where does this consciousness comes from, then he identifies that jivatma is the one where the consciousness is coming from. And then upon further research, then where he says that he kind of goes back and sees that, okay, there is reflection on water, and that reflection of water is where he says, Prabhupada Prabhupada and our acharyas are telling, is the first reflection in the threefold ego, is because in the threefold ego we are misidentifying ourselves with the three ahankaras, as it says, trivid ahankaro. So in the false ego, so this jivatma, even though is emerged in this misidentification on the threefold ahankaras, is actually a ray of manifestation of the Paramatma. And when he starts to identify, kind of correlating back to the original reflection of the water, it is just but a reflection of the sun energy, which is the sun ray, is reflecting on the water. And then a curious or a intellectual person then realizes that, oh, it is the jivatma is actually energy of the Paramatma, but right now is emerged or submerged or captivated by this threefold ego, which is the hankara. And then the solution that Srila Prabhupada then points out is to move from the position of identifying with the false ego, which is this I am this body and everything in relationship to this body is mine. From that level, moving on to the Shuddha Sattva or Vasudeva situation, which is being in the pure state of goodness. And that Srila Prabhupada then calls it as the real ego. And so that's so a self-realized soul thus reflected first is thus reflected first in the threefold ego, and then in the body, senses, and mind. Then so the through the sequence of kind of inferences and reflecting, if we first of all realize that there is a jivatma that exists, and then through that inference we also realize that there is paramatma that exists, and the only process of realizing that, and as our acharyas explain, is a pure devotee then so in order to fully realize the paramatma, who is the source of everything, the process is to purifying the misidentification of the ahankara, and that can happen only through the bhakti. And that's what in essence, and that's again is a beauty of the purport that I felt of Srila Prabhupada is kind of is straight back to the kind of primary thing that all of us need to understand is of this bhakti. So Srila Prabhupada in multiple different ways is kind of explains the same thing of there's a false ego, and then how are we impacted by that false ego, and what is the remedy for that false ego, and then what happens when you are moved from that false ego into the real ego is one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of God. And the line that Srila Prabhupada writes is: a pure devotee then can realize the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything by the reflection of his energy. So that is what we wanted to conclude with, saying that there is an inference of reflection that happens, but finally what both Kapila Dev and Srila Prabhupada are suggesting to us is to kind of move away from the false identification of I am this body into the real identification, which is Srila Prabhupada calls it as real ego, as an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. And the only process to realize, come to that, uh, to achieve the transformation is through the process of bhakti. Um, so before we end, I just wanted to read um, the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on this, which, yeah. So this is just to kind of in summarizing the everything that we discussed with respect to that. So this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. He says, how the jiva can be understood and then how Paramatma can be understood are explained with an example. When the reflection of the sun in water without disturbance appears on the clean wall of a house, people sitting in a corner of the house first sees the reflection on the wall. They think, where is this reflection coming from? They then infer that it is the reflection of the bright sun on still water, reflected on the wall. Where does the reflection on the water come from? They then infer that the sun is shining in the sky and by his reflection in the water creates the reflection on the wall. Intelligent people first see the manifestations of Paramatma in the body, senses, and mind, since it possesses consciousness. Then they ask, where does this manifestation of Paramatma come from? They infer that Jivatma, which exists by misidentification in the threefold Ahankara, is a ray of manifestation of Paramatma by its reflection in the body, senses, and mind. By the presence of Jivatma, filled with bhakti, this is the Sat Abhasena word that comes in the verse, where by the presence of Jivatma filled with bhakti, who is a manifestation of Paramatma, one then realizes Paramatma, full of existence, knowledge, and bliss. So to kind of it's we also realize Paramatma through a devotee who is filled with bhakti, who is a manifestation of Paramatma in our lives. It could be our spiritual masters and our like our Patpada Krishaka gurus or Siksha gurus, and the amazing devotees that we are surrounded with. And when in the presence of such jivatmas who are filled with bhakti, who is a manifestation of Paramatma, one then realizes Paramatma full of existence, knowledge, and bliss. And so with that, we'll conclude today's discussion. If there are any corrections or comments, sorry I went a little over time, which I think I do every time. Sorry. nothing else, then I hope we'll all have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्री प्रभुपाद की जय।